many times. So I say, well, you know, I'm a member of this organization. There are a bunch of adventurers, and through some of the emails that go back and forth, I happened upon this email about this organization that's just trying to get together, and they're planning a trip down to see the Titanic in a submersible. Well, prior to that, being here at the club, I always would see the two cups from Ralph White, who was our member, the first one to go, of the members to go down to see the Titanic. That always impressed me. It's like, wow, wouldn't that be an experience to go down and actually see the Titanic? So at that point, you know, it was already in my mind. And then when I saw that come up many years later, it's like, well, let me at least look into it. So I started looking into it, and of course it was very expensive. I called and tried to talk and see if I could make some sort of arrangement. And Stockton was actually amenable to it because I had a long history in the travel business, and I told him I could help him with the marketing. And as a result, he gave me a discount, which I swore I wouldn't, you know, tell anyone. So I'm not going to say anything. Keep a word on that, yeah. But let's just say that I didn't.
After we stop recording, we can.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't pay $250,000 like the billionaires did, but timing for me was just everything kind of fell into place. I had just sold a home here in Los Angeles, had a fair amount of equity, so the funds were available. I was, you know, looking for something to do, and again, this whole thing. I mean, the movie was certainly an experience. You know, like many, I had the opportunity to see it many times, but also the history of it. So that, you know, all of those things kind of said, yeah, why not? And, you know, as my wife will attest to many times, it's like, why not? And I'll go ahead and, and do it. So, so that's how it started.
Wow.
And I kind of got in late. Stockton started like 3 years before I talked to him. And so they were just putting it together for that season. It was the spring, and the summer was the season. And he made room for me on the first one.
Wow.
They had an opening. And so that worked out for me. In hindsight, everything was just incredibly lucky. I was literally at the right place at the right time. So it all kind of fell into place, and that's how I got on.
It sounds like you're very proactive about seeking out a seat on this this dive.
I was, yeah, I was.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that I really wanted to do, and you know, as we'll get into a little bit, you know, all of the dives weren't successful. In fact, most weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that I was not only able to get a seat or a place on the inaugural mission, but I was also able to actually be successful in seeing the bow. That was just amazing, yeah.
Did the construction or timing give you any pause when you first started exploring this as an option for adventure? When you started talking with the crew and you know, negotiating the price for the voyage, did you stop and think, well, maybe? The
organization is based in Seattle. They really didn't have a lot of crew at that time. They had some people who operated in the office, but at that time, it was more just dealing with the people that were setting everything up. So I didn't really have a lot of insight into the construction and submersible and everything at that time. Later on, as I got closer, I made some inquiries and had some discussions, and I think I'll explain that a little bit more detail when we show some of these slides that I have here about why I felt it was safe and I was maybe a little bit naive, but at the time, but why I felt it was safe anyway.
So I guess when we get to the slides, we'll touch on that a little bit. So
We will, yeah.
back to the beginning, you've made contact, you've secured a seat.
Yes.
You were probably ecstatic. Did you tell all your friends and family? How did?
No.
No.
Not exactly. And my daughter over there, she's smiling. No. I had told them that I was going on an adventure, and which, I've known to do on occasion. So they were really curious, like, what are you going to do? And I said, well, it's going to be pretty cool. It's about 10 days. Going up in northeastern Canada, and but I said, I'll tell you when I'm there or when I get back. So, but they were really curious. I kept pressing, and one of the things that my daughter Kristen here had said, well, because she knows I watched all those shows like Treasure of Oak Island and that. She goes, oh, because I was flying out of Halifax on my way back. She goes, oh, I know what you're doing. You're going to go up there and look for the gold on Oak Island. I says, well, I'm not telling you, So I across or two and two, across from each other, and then I was the one that was up in front. Yeah, okay, we can go, I'm sorry, ahead one more. Yeah, ahead one. Okay, right here we can go to this one. So the current slide, if we want to show, is it showing the bow? Okay, so this is the first sight of the bow. And as you can see, I'm also struggling to put the flag up there too. So that was the point of impact. That was the real wow, and the first time we saw the bow and the ship. For all of those who lost their lives there, it was very touching. Prior to going, I had read many accounts, first-hand accounts of the survivors. So it was kind of chilling. But to be able to see it there firsthand, not on TV or anything, just like, wow, it's right there. That was amazing. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced. So no matter what, was done after or before or whatever, I will always have that particular thing to be able to go back and say that I was there, I experienced it, and a lot of it had to do with luck. Many great explorers, one of the first things they say is, you have to have luck. And in this case, I think I had a lot of luck.
Lots of luck.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what was the total trip time there and back?
It's about 2.5 hours descending from the surface. The way the submersible's designed, there's no portholes, so it takes a long time to get it in place, and there's a whole procedure for launching, which it takes up time. And then the actual descent, if everything goes correctly, which it didn't on my first dive, then you should be on the seafloor in about 2.5 hours. So 2.3, a little over 2.3 miles. And then we had the opportunity, because we got close to the wreck, we had the opportunity to explore quite a bit of it. The bow section, because the bow and the astern were separated quite a ways, and there's no way we would have had enough battery or time to go and see the other. And then going back up was relatively smooth as well. We had about 2.5 hours going back up as well, and then it was a very long process, especially when you have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, well, like 5 hours or more in a minivan.
Well, it was 10 hours altogether.
Wow.
But I did have an opportunity. There's a little can there, which was actually my seat in the front there. There's a picture of it. But yeah, it was like, come on, guys, come on. Because they have this whole process, which we'll see a little bit. But anyway, yeah.
What a fantastic view of the bow of the Titanic.
It really is. You know, that's the money shot. You know, I mentioned about Menson, and, you know, when he saw the rear of the ship where it said Endurance, he says, that's the money shot. He says, that's like the bow of the Titanic. And, of course, that is it. You know, the Titanic, you know, Stockton, who was quite an interesting person, a real character, and he was, you know, part salesperson, part aerospace engineer, but but he would like to, you know, he always said, well, you know, you go anywhere in the world, and there's 3 things that people know. You know, it's like, you know, the Pope and Elvis and the Titanic. So it's like, I'm not sure if that's true, but anyway, certainly Titanic is embedded in people's mind over the years. Yeah, in a week, it'll be 113 years. Anyway. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. So here, yeah, so here's the first mission. Now the mission actually consisted of 5 planned dives, and the first dive, when we got there, was canceled because of the waves. And the way that the vehicle is launched, you have to have pretty calm seas. In dive 2, which had ended up a friend of mine who is a good friend now, lives in Michigan. He and astronaut Scott Peresinski were on that dive. Now that dive was successful in the fact that it made it all the way down, but they had issues when they got to the bottom, and they were too far to see the wreck. They did get a chance to see a little bit of the debris, but that was it. And then comes my dive, the dive number 3, which is my first dive. And the fact that the day before they made it all the way down was kind of good for me. It's like, okay, we can do this.
They could dial it in after that. They could dial in the navigation. And,
somewhat.
yeah.
Come to find out, the currents do play havoc because you're pretty much at the mercy of where you land. Now, you can do a little bit of manipulation, and we have a grid that we try to keep track of where we're at any given time and how far we're going to be from the wreck. So But that wasn't the issue. First of all, we lost power, and the screens weren't working. And then
How far into the dive?
this was about halfway. And then about 3/4 of the way in, it got worse because we lost communication.
Wow.
And then we lost power on one side. So it was at that point that the decision was made, pretty obvious that we should abort the mission. In order to ascend or abort the mission, there is a series of weights that are alongside in a rack, and there's a mechanism that's operated by a solenoid electric, and it releases the weights. Then the submersible becomes buoyant and floats back up. Unfortunately, that didn't work because of the electrical problem.
Wow.
So now we're stuck, and one of the thoughts was that they have a backup, which is these weights that they tie underneath, and the weights are tied with this dissolvable material. And supposedly after 24 hours, this will dissolve and you float back up. So we were concerned, but we weren't really afraid. Nobody was panicking.
Really?
There's some video there, but it doesn't. At that particular time, I didn't record anything. But the fact that everyone was really focused on, okay, what do we need to do to solve the problem to get back up to the top? So it was mentioned that if we were to somehow release these weights mechanically, so the idea was in the tube, the submersible, these are loaded from the top and it's supposed to drop off the bottom. Now, if we were able to turn the sub in a way that it would be over far enough, the weights would roll off the top. So that's what we did. So we all got in a row, went up the side, and then turned around and went up the other side. So we created this rocking motion to the point where we kept going, and then finally I heard a clunk. And it's like, wow, that was one of the best sounds I ever heard. And we continued to do that till all the weights were off, and we ascended.
Yeah.
And we ascended. And this is the part that kind of flabbergasts everyone. Because after we got up back to the top, and we were, there's a debriefing every night and all that, but Stockton says, well, Bill, do you want to go tomorrow? And believe it or not, I said yes.
So you went on 2 dives?
I did.
You went on 2 dives with OceanGate. It was the same crew both times? Or
Correct.
same group of people?
Yes, yeah. P.H. Nargelet, who's a wonderful gentleman, and Stockton, and a couple other guys. But so as it turned out, that one worked out perfectly. So
Almost. As close to perfect as possible.
well, the second one. No,
The second one.
The second one was the one where you saw the bow and everything. And then I felt bad because there's some other people that were planning on going, and their dive was scrubbed because of weather. So if we want to take a look at the next slide, you can see, if it's playing, yeah. You can see some of the deck, the wreckage there. And this is taken on my camera, on my phone, looking out the front. And Stockton, everyone was really happy I took all this footage because their camera ended up not working.
Wow.
So this was really good. They were happy.
So for a manned submarine, this is impressively close to the Titanic. About how close do you think you got at the closest point?
Well, we didn't want to bump into it but you can see, I think maybe the next slide will show you, or the one, oops.
Right, it's close, isn't it? It's very, very close.
It's like in slow motion, though. You know, you kind of float along and you kind of try to react before you need to.
Was there any discussion or concern about
Yes.
possibly disturbing the wreck site?
There is, but we were careful on that. At one point, this was the beauty about, and there was not really a lot of, I don't think we could hear the narration, but I was so lucky and happy to have P.H. Nargelet, who's called Mr. Titanic. He's been to the Titanic 37 times. He's the famous French diver, and he had done many dives in conjunction with the owners of the rights, salvage rights. And he, if anyone's ever been to Las Vegas and saw the big piece, as they say, PH is the one that coordinated and brought that up, along with many other things. So yeah, he really knows his stuff in terms of the Titanic. So I was literally this is bacteria that only lives in certain conditions, and unfortunately, this is one of them. And and they form like stalactites or mites there, and that's a piece of the flooring, I think.
So that bacteria that eats away at the hull there, do they give it a date when the Titanic will be completely eaten away?
There, you know, they say 20 years, but in 20 years there will be the whole ship won't be sizable as much. So there's
Our screen is back up, by the way.
Oh, it is good.
Yeah.
So we can look at other. The next video maybe is a. So this video here, I think we get a little closer, actually.
So you mentioned it was cold during the dive.
What
was the temperature? What was the atmosphere like in the submersible?
So there was actually no heater at all, no heating, no air conditioning in the submersible. The heat comes from people's body, and the dome in the front, which is solid titanium, gets really cold. And then, since then, you know, shortly after the tragedy, Nanette and I So I had an extra one of these coins, and we gave it to Sedone, and she was really moved, very touched.
I get a very touching moment there.
Yeah, she said we were the only ones that, came over and did anything like that. But I'm sure others have now. But he had just a wonderful family, and we felt. So it was, in my opinion, it was a small token, but it meant so much to her that in turn, then it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful.
So between your dive, your experience on the Titan, and the tragedy, how many dives were there? How many expeditions were there?
There were 13 that made it. I'm not sure how many were in total. I think they were trying to do 2 or 3 weeks summer. The weather has to be just right. But again, I don't know. But it wasn't a whole lot.
That actually made it to the boat.
Yes, correct. Yeah, 13. That's what I heard. I may be wrong on that one, but
This is turning into a choose-your-own-adventure interview.
yeah, yes.
In terms of, well, I guess you hinted at this earlier, you had some experience with the material science behind the sub.
Yeah, if we can go to that slide with the airplane and.
Yeah, I'd love to know, looking at this sub, what your thoughts were.
Okay, the current slide, okay. So, I worked in the travel business for my aunt and uncle started a business, and we grew it to a pretty good size. And so there was a company plane in the upper left there, and this plane is called a Starship. It was built over 20-some years ago. But it was going to be the best business aircraft ever, because it was the first one to have carbon fiber. It had all glass cockpit, and then if you look over to the right, there's a little article that says about a doomed aircraft, and the reason it was doomed is because the FAA did not know how to deal with the carbon fiber. So they kept wanting to have more rigid construction, and as a result, it kept adding weight. So initially, it was designed as a one-person or one-pilot airplane. Now, all of a sudden, it's over the limit. They have to have 2 pilots. It just no longer economically that feasible. But it was a wonderful plane. Because of the carbon fiber, we could go up to 42,000 feet and so forth. And it had the canard wing. It was actually designed by the Burt Rutan. And then, so after my uncle sold the business, I was still on as president, and the company that bought us was this huge company called TUI out of England, and they owned 10 different airlines over there, smaller little operations, but they were the first ones to order the 787s. And we had a meeting up in Seattle, and Boeing invited us over to take a look at this in the fuselage, again, of the 787's carbon fiber. Now, supposedly, this is where Stockton got his carbon fiber from. But,
interesting.
But any attempts to ask Boeing, and they say, it's like, no,
Nothing to do with it.
nothing to do with it. Yeah. But apparently, that's what he said, he got it.
Boeing's getting its karma now, I mean.
Oh, God, yeah. But, yes, you got that right. But so needless to say, here's another instance in where the 787 was delayed many years because of the FAA and the restrictions and the safety and all of that, which, looking back is certainly the way to go, and it needs to be done. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, in both instances I were familiar with, it kind of delayed and stalled. So when Stockton said, the reason I can't get this certified is because all of these delays, and they won't, they need this, and they won't understand this, and so I, in the back of my mind, I was naive and stupid, and I said, well, I can relate to that because I had seen it happen. And
you'd seen it firsthand.
Yeah, a couple other scenarios, but unfortunately, the Aero space use of carbon fiber cannot be related to submersing something down with that kind of intense pressure. Two different things.
I suppose you're right. You have atmospheres of pressure
Oh, yeah.
from the outside versus a flight. You have pressure on the inside of the
all
craft.
of those things. So again, on a cursory level, I knew just enough to be dangerous and think, oh, yeah, that's fine. So a lot of people say, well, didn't you think about, it's like, yeah, well, I investigated as much as I could, and, I felt it was okay, and I went.
So, in hindsight, do you think, well, I guess from a marketing perspective, as you were beginning to assist with marketing and
Right,
driving that, do you think the mishap here really, crushed commercial submersible travel? For poor choice of words, but
I don't see anything happening in the near future that would be affordable in those levels. You still have the 1 and 2 person submersibles that are built, by governments, Russia or others, France. But those, again, everything is based on a spherical. So the place where the people sit are in the sphere. And, when you go to that kind of depth, that's really the design that needs to be. Unless it's solid, maybe you could do a tube like that, solid titanium, but then it would be like a rock. So that was Stockton's, brainstorm, and said, hey, I can do this. We can put more than 2 people on. We can make it, it could be a money-making venture. Everyone wants to go to the Titanic, but that, in my opinion, is done. So, eventually, if they come up with some sort of a larger vehicle and put a dozen people in it, and it's all titanium, and they test it beyond, take it down to the Mariana Trench or something, and, and really make sure it's safe, then maybe. But I don't see that happening for a long time.
Sure. Yeah. After something like this, it's pretty hard to recover image and perception of safety, even though, people will come along and redesign and make it safer.
Yes, absolutely.
So interesting stuff. It's must be strange thinking about your adventure in light of the tragedy that happened. Thinking back on that, what are some feelings that come up for you?
The feelings are mixed. I feel like in some respects that I was one of the luckiest people ever. And as my wife Nanette says, my guardian angel works overtime. Yeah. and I think that was the case there. So I'm very thankful. There's a copy of the LA Times and a bunch of other articles. And the interviews on TV and that we didn't play them, but we don't need to. But the LA Times article focused in on the survivor's remorse. And there's at the time it happened, there was a certain amount of that. So I think about that. It's like, I'm here, PH, and these guys aren't. So there's that. And then the other side of it is, wow, I got to do something that very few people do. So a little bit of both.
Do you think those feelings and this kind of new perspective is going to impact how you pursue adventure in the future?
Yes. The first thing I did when I got back is I apologized to my wife and to and to my daughters, and because I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done it, and I know. So yeah, going forward, they know what I'm doing and what I'm up to, and I'm cautious and yeah. So yeah, that's my feelings going forward.
How do you feel about the way the press handled the tragedy? The questions that were asked, the portrayals of the company?
Initially, yeah, there's the slide. Yeah, thank you. Initially, I didn't want to talk a lot about it because I felt it wasn't my position, number one. A story the other people on it, and after the Titanic sank, there were people out there in the media way back then that were almost chastising the wealthy. You know, all these wealthy people thought they had everything, and now they're, you know, so it was a similar thing. It's like, oh, these billionaires, they got, you know, what they deserved in that. So I think, you know, things sometimes don't change. You know, obviously I'm not making any money unless you guys want to pay me.
Well, we're gonna pass a hat around later.
Oh, okay. Well, no, you know, you know, that's not me, of course, and I wouldn't want to. But I do want to say that I am currently working with the U.S. Coast Guard, and I'm hoping that within a year or so, they'll have more concrete answers for everybody.
Touch a little bit more on that. Expand on that. How are you working with the Coast Guard? What is that looking like?
They have requested basically all documentation that I have, including media in that. So, and I'm
from the dives.
Yes, and I'm complying with that. So I have, you know, a couple hours worth of video that I don't want to bore everyone with, but there's certainly plenty of video. And there's instances where you overhear, in fact, if you guys want to see one, you want to,
Yes.
Can we go to the slide that shows the tunnel? Yeah, that one there, current slide. Now, can you play the video, or? Oh, that's it. Well, anyway, that's Stockton. So the thing basically shut down. So he's in the back trying to repair it.
Wow.
And we're about, you know, 1,000 feet down. But wait till you hear what comes up here in a minute.
So at this point, what had gone wrong? What is he trying to repair?
The video screen,
Video screen.
which controls everything.
Just asking if they have any ideas.
Yeah, they gotta start thinking of ideas, because
Do you have any other ideas? We're scrubbing for ideas right now.
But if you listen right now, I think.
Did you want to swap monitors just to see if it's the same?
Yeah, it's like, we think it's either a power problem or video screen problem. I would suggest, if possible, if you could power off the control computer and then power off completely the set and bring everything back up from a cold start. That would be my recommendation at this point. Over.
that's already been done. No change.
So prior to this, at the beginning, I think he was asking all of us on the Titan.
Cord that powers that monitor.
If we had ideas, and he was talking to the mothership
Possibly
as well. So obviously they didn't know what was going on. But
For not knowing what's going on with the screen that controls the entire operation here, I'm very impressed at the level of calm everyone's maintained. And this is more akin to when the AV goes down in the back of the Adventurers Club here,
Right.
versus a
Yeah.
submarine.
yeah,
So
I don't think
Yeah.
it's necessary.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the submarine 1,000 feet down is
So yeah, that's an example, and there's some that are more negative or more dirt. But anyway, I want to give you a realistic idea of what it was like down there, and I think I did. So
I think you absolutely have. This is a fantastic insight into what the reality of a dive on the OceanGate Titanic or Titan would have been like.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to have such a clear inside view of what the procedures were, what happens when a screen goes down, what happens when you hover over the Titanic and everything goes right. It's I remember seeing all of the media coverage of the tragedy of the explosion or the implosion rather, and
right.
the memes and the like you said, media frenzy, everything happening, and this is not at all how it's characterized. So to give us
Right.
and our club here an inside look is quite a special thing.
Yeah, there was some negative stuff that do have merit. I'm sorry. And for instance, there was a lot of comparisons about we're spending all this money, government-wise, Coast Guard Net, for this rescue of these billionaires. Meanwhile, there's other people, dying in boats across the world. And so there was a lot of that, and, that's understandable. I can see that. One of the things that was in my mind is that I knew, going into it, that, because I was talking to Stockton, I says, what happens if there's a little leak? He says, oh, don't worry about it, you'll never know. And I go, what do you mean? No, he was honest. That's exactly what he said. He goes, you'll never know. He says, if there's a little leak, it'll be over just like that.
Wow.
Your brain won't even process it. And there's been a lot of talk about that, but no, he told me that. So, and he also said that if we're down there and we have a problem, nobody's going to come and get us. There's nobody that has the technology or the whatever to come and get us. Now, we did have a ROV on board that possibly could have. In fact, they used that ROV on the rescue mission. But I think on my dive in the first mission, the first year, they used a different mothership. They used the Horizon Arctic, which was much more state-of-the-art, and it had a lot more features and that. So by the time they got to the third year, they used the other ship, which was a similar vessel, but it didn't have the capabilities. So instead of being able to launch it off the back, they had to pull it and drag the whole unit on the back. And I think that was a downside.
There's a lot of iterations of this sub.
It's the same sub. It's just a matter of how do we get it there. And I think that the first year that ship was available and it was reasonably priced, and by the time it came the third year, it wasn't. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know the audience is bursting with questions, and if it's all right with you, I'd love to open it up to those
of course.
questions.
Of course.
Looks like we have
I'm
one
going
right
to
here.
start with one question here. You talked about the current. Lance Miller, 1222. You talk about the currents. Are the currents at different levels going different directions? Because you got 2.5 miles you're going down through. So, or is it one sort of general current?
There's one general current, but within that there is also, because it's such a 2.5 miles, or such a long distance, that there are different layers and different currents. Yes.
Okay. Questions?
So there are, 5, 6 people ostensibly risking their lives, and nobody else wanted to sit up front just because it was cold?
Yeah.
I just have a hard time believing that no one was like, no, I don't need to see it.
Well, no, everyone could see it. Everyone could
Okay.
see it. Well, because it was on the monitors. Of course, we had.
But you're the only one who got the window.
True.
Nobody else wanted to see out
Yeah.
the window?
They, Yeah.
I'd sit on a toilet to see a Titan. Well, thank you for the answer.
No, but you're right. Now, so there's, a few other things to go in it. My stature is such that I could kind of curl up in there. Some of the other guys were taller, and, they would be really cramped in there. So, but I kept saying, does somebody want to come up? And it's like, no, that's all right.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was no schedule, there was no appointed areas or whatever. It was pretty.
I want to ask the audience that we ask questions through the microphone so YouTube can get it, and we don't get a free-for-all of just asking questions here. So I'll come around to you, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Next question.
I have the talking mic. Well, I'm trying to derail there for a second. Do you believe that there's any pushes for any other commercial dives back on the Titanic, given the tragedy, or after the tragedy, that's the end of the voyages?
Commercial, yeah, they will continue to. There's been talk about retrieving more material from there, so those would be considered commercial. But those are going to be conducted in already well-proven vehicles. They're not going to be, quote, as they say, tourist sightseeing vehicles. So, yeah.
Hey, Craig Carroll, 1230. That was an awesome talk. It was super interesting to be on the inside. I'm curious, is there just a general thought that there's just a degradation in the material over that number of dives, or is there any theory as to why it imploded?
If you go on the internet, there's at least 1,000 theories. If you want my opinion, I would say it's a combination of things. The first dive that I was on, I heard some cracking noise. And they apply the laminates in sheets overlaying. And, I think that if the vehicle is bumped, repeatedly, then that could dent it and theoretically weaken that area. There was a lot of other theories and some things that were pointed out that on the ill-fated dive that they were sinking at a rate that was very fast, too fast. And so if there was a little compromised area and they put it down too quick, then it may have imploded as a result of that. So there's a number of things. And then there's the thing about the difference between the titanium and the titanium and the carbon fiber, two different, that when it gets cold, they shrink in different levels in that.
I was watching a documentary, and it was simulating the ship going down in a broken half. Uh-huh. And the bow went one direction and the transom went a different direction. Mm-hmm. Does anyone ever go to see the
yes.
other transom areas?
Yeah. The Titan actually was involved in mapping at one point, mapping the entire wreck site. So the bow, surprisingly, actually, you don't see that much of the bow because the bow went in real deep. On the other hand, the stern, when it went down, it went, bottom first, and it kind of pancaked. So there's not a lot to see because all the decks are kind of pancaked like that. And then there's a debris field, between the two. But they're quite a distance. In fact, I don't know if you can find that slide of the yellow legal paper with the squares on it. Yeah, so if you if you look real close, you'll see that the one on the left is my scribbling, and but one of my duties was to check in different times as far as our rate of descent and our where we were located, and then we were able to pinpoint on the map next to it. And if you look at the up in the upper center, there looks like a cigar. That is the part of the wreck. That is the bow section. And then all the way on the bottom left is the stern, and the rest is debris. And then if you go over to the right there, you'll see that's our progress in how we got down there, and we had to maneuver and manipulate according to the grid.
So you had a set of duties to
Yes.
perform on the
Yes.
on the sub.
I was a photographer, and to coordinate the mapping. Yeah.
So what were some of the other responsibilities?
Communication was one, and another was to work with the videos, which ended up not working, but yeah, so I used my own film.
One more here.
Yes.
Bill, just so we can kind of contextualize the map, the grid, what are the size of each of those grids that we're looking at there, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say probably each one would be maybe 30 meters.
Look like two different directions, like two different sizes, or are they squares?
They're supposed to be squares, yeah. Yeah.
Was the trip down purely as a tourist, or was there also scientific objectives to the Titan submersible? How do they balance those two, et cetera? I'm curious.
Yes, there were. I mean, to monitor the amount of decay was one of the scientific aspects, and to see, you know, what if Eddie was sea life down there at the same time, and to get an idea of what was still remaining there. But you know, for me, it was a chance to see it. To be honest with you, I'm not a scientist, but I enjoy, you know, learning about all that and contributing and being part of it. But that was the thing for me.
Got one more question.
Hey, Bill, I want to ask about the decision to go on the second dive after he had some power loss, and you shake the weights off, and on one part of me says, huh, but the other part, I've been places and I've done stuff like, oh, that didn't kill me. We got out of it.
You know, that I tried to explain that to some people, and it's like, well, I said, well, look at it this way. We had 3 major problems, and we came back to the top, and we survived. So what more could go wrong? And now, maybe I'm looking at it a little different. And so a funny story, though, if you got a second, is that, so a good friend of mine, he knows some in Chicago. He says, oh, Bill, you got to talk to my buddy at radios. He's at WLS, one of the big stations there in Chicago. So he interviewed me, and so we're going on, and I told him a story about what happened on the first dive, and then went on the second. And then you know, we were joking about the live mic before. So anyway, after we were done, I hung up, but his mic was still live, and he went to his assistant there, and he goes, I can't believe he went on the second dive.
So, Bill, this is fascinating. Thank you so much. 2 quick questions. First of all, I'd like to find out about the other 2 guests, but more important than that, I'm curious about Stockton's reaction. As I count actually 3 things going wrong. His camera didn't work, the video thing is you had, or whatever that screen was, and of course the weights.
Yes.
So I think there are probably other things. I'm just curious about how Stockton handled those things, and the other guy, PH, too. Thanks.
The video screen thing happened on the first dive, which ended up being aborted. The second dive was pretty smooth for the most part. Now, we didn't capture there was a situation where the batteries weren't working because it got so cold, the batteries weren't working on the video cameras. But that was it.
So we have a opportunity here, I think. Your wife is in the audience.
Yes.
Can we give her the mic for a moment and have her tell us how she felt about all this, finding out after the fact? If it's okay, I don't want to, put anyone on the spot, but I'd love to know how you felt coming back from this.
We're not putting you on the spot, okay?
She's been waiting for this opportunity.
Actually, I have to do this. Well, I didn't know that Bill was where he was, because lots of times I don't know where Bill is. I knew he was going on an adventure, but I didn't even know that you could go to the Titanic, and I don't I can't imagine you couldn't pay me enough to go to do that. I don't even ride the submarine in Disneyland, right? I don't do that. We're very different. But it's just, that's how Bill is. Like, that's what turns him on. He loves adventure. He doesn't seem to feel fear very often. Like, I do enough of that for both of us. So I was like, I can't believe he went down the second time. I feel just like that guy at the radio station. I cannot believe that you did that. But what else would you do? That's what Bill would do. And so it's just kind of having to accept that he's an adventurous guy. That's why we're sitting in a room full of people just like him. So,
Yes, you absolute saint. Thank you all so much for your fantastic questions. Let's give Bill a round of applause as well. What a great talk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. You did an amazing job of interviewing. I appreciate everything.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. All right, Phoebe, hit it.